Icewind Dale Tactica, looking at party composition. That's what we're going to explore. Sharing one of the builds that I like to run when we're looking to do something a little bit different. Now, I need to framework for a moment. Icewind Dale and Baldur's Gate, they share the same engine. They've got the same character classes, a lot of the same different classic Advanced Dungeons and Dragons monsters in different incarnations. And naturally, they share some of the same synergies. The primary difference between the two is the fact that in Baldur's Gate, you've got your primary character that you create at the beginning of the game, but then as played, you discover party members. NPCs join your party, and while you have some control of how they're going to level up, you don't have any control over the character classes. This means your party composition is limited to what's in the game. Now, in that framework, of course, discovering the NPCs, applying different combinations, there's a lot of fun in that. And there is a way to override that and kind of create your own party. But that's how the engine, how the storyline, how the game is intended to be played. Now we switch over to Icewind Dale. And the first time I played Icewind Dale, I thought it was like Baldur's Gate. So I'm making it like through the first chapter of the game, looking for NPCs, and I can't find anybody. And then I realized, wait, you get to craft and control your entire party. So what this means, of course, is you've got your primary story that you're going to run through. Then you've got all of the side quests that you may or may not pick up along the way. But then even if you've done the main quest a couple of times, you know the story, you've done the side quests, the tactics of the different party builds really brings some interesting gameplay to Icewind Dale. We also layer that over by the fact that the focus of the game is a lot more combat-oriented and mass combat-oriented. And again, that's not to say there isn't a storyline, but the focus of the engine is delivering some pretty interesting battles along the way. Party composition. One option, of course, is a well-rounded classic AD&D party, and you can have a lot of fun playing that. But then this party build that I like to utilize involves two very kind of secondary character classes that often aren't played. And by bringing them in together with a combat-focused build makes things very, very interesting. So we've got that framework. Now, before we jumped into the character classes, the next decision, of course, is you've got your 6 character slots. Do you bring a mage? Do you go arcane? And whether that's playing a sorcerer / dragon disciple, or are you playing a wizard, a wild mage, a focused mage? Slight spoiler here, but not really. Icewind Dale, the setting in the Forgotten Realms, it's more of a low magic game. That's not to say that magic is not going to have an impact. This is Advanced Dungeons and Dragons. You need to understand magic. But there's not an overly ton amount of mage gear. Spells are a little bit harder to come by. And there's some encounters where in Baldur's Gate, blasting it with magic would make it auto-win. Things are a little bit more challenging in the Dale. So you can get away with possibly not playing a mage if you cover some other bases and still having a very, very powerful party. Where in Baldur's Gate, as you move into BG2 and you move into Throne, you kind of really want or really need a mage, or you need to know the game so well if you skip the mage. So within that framework, this party build does not have a mage. Okay, I start out with a Berserker. Fighter class, subclass, Berserker. I'm going to dual wield 2 weapons. What they are kind of depends on what I'm feeling in the moment. Right now, I do Morningstar and a Flail because they share the same weapon classification. So I can put full specialization in that without burning any pips. I can then put it into dual wield, have a high strength, have a high dex. You get a good, decent amount of attacks. Weapon speed is good. There's a couple of magic items that I can boost that up. When I hit the Berserk type button, that jacks it up. This is my primary damage dealer. And of course, being a fighter class, taking advantage of that 18 constitution, this gives me a lot of attacks, a lot of damage, and it evens out, right? Behind the scenes, we're rolling that D20. I've got a THAC0 to hit armor class 0. This is AD&D 2nd edition rules. While I'm trying to have the highest bonuses, right? As I level up, my THAC0 gets better and better. But naturally, I'm trying to boost that with specializations. I'm trying to boost that with buffs. I'm trying to boost that with +1, +2 magic items. We're going to do all that. That's like the meta of D&D. But just stacking the pure number of attacks that you can is very, very important. So that's the focus of the Berserker, boosting that up. Frontline fighter. Second, Dwarven Defender. I want to have 2 fighter classes. Now, you could do Paladin. You could do another fighter. I do the Dwarven Defender partially because I really like one of the character portraits, but also the Defender is great as an anchor point where you want to, again, Icewind Dale being a little bit more tactical, a lot more monsters. I send out my Berserker. I send out the Dwarven Defender. I camp in that main primary area. The mobs come in. The monsters come in. You go defensive with the Dwarven Defender. You've got the hit points. You've got attacks, not quite as many as the Berserker with dual wield, although you could do a dual wield there if you want. I usually do single hand axe or sword, shield, get the armor class. That stacks with the Dwarven Defender. Those are the 2 damage dealers. Those are the anchor points. When combat breaks out, they're rushing ahead. They're camping in the center point, and they're just trying to do as much damage as they can. Now I've got a monk. And a monk's really interesting because your armor class in the beginning, I do primary, just standard monk. Could do dark moon monk, but the standard monk has the stunning fist. And the monk is interesting because you've got some okay attacks. It's not a frontline fighter. It's not dealing tons of damage, but it can work with the Berserker. It can work with the Defender, still putting out some damage. If things get tough and I take a lot of hits, my movement rate is very fast, I can pull away. I want a second tier fighter. The reason why I pick a monk, and again, this build is trying to be solid, but it's also focusing on just some fun things to do. Stunning Fist and Quivering Palm, they're kind of interesting at certain points. Like, yes, this has to happen, that has to happen, saving throws. There's ways you can lower that, jack that up, manipulate that. But having certain encounters, certain fights where I can one-fist it or stun it, compared with the attacks from the Defender and the Berserker, that's got a little bit of bite to it. That's got some interesting, like, this could be really, really unique. And the monk still dishes out enough damage as a second tier fighter, plus there's some gear. It works. Now, early on in the game, you realize just how weak a monk is because you can't get that armor class down quickly, right? Initially, in Icewind Dale, I buy a chain shirt. Maybe I get scale. I very quickly upgrade to plate. We've got a shield, then I get the +1 shield, I get the +1 plate, this and that, dexterity bonuses. You get that armor class down very, very fast. The monk with no armor, your dexterity, your armor class is trash. You've got the dex bonus, that's it. And then it gradually goes down. There's a couple of gear items that will help it get down quicker. But what this means is you've got to be careful early on. Because out of all the characters in this build, the monk is the one that's mostly going to get killed just because, now you play a monk in Baldur's Gate, and you're like, well, the monk in BG seems to have a little more bite and last longer because combat in Baldur's Gate isn't as intense. There's a lot of mobs. There's a lot of mass combat in Icewind Dale. So just by the fact that my monk is up there, and instead of getting attacked by, say, 1 or 2 encounter monsters, I'm getting attacked like 5, 6, 10. It stacks on very quick. And look, behind the scenes, that THAC0 engine, the monsters are going to roll 16, 17, 18, 20 and hit me. So I need to be very, very careful early on with the monk, survivability. But once we get to the mid and high levels, I've got enough hit points. I've got enough evasion. My armor class is okay. I'm dealing great damage. I've got the stunning fist. I've got the quivering palm. So we're ready there. Then I layer in a thief. Now, lots of ways to build a thief. I build kind of a trap slash locks slash remove traps, set traps, detect illusion. I don't go into stealth. You lose a little bit of a sneak attack bonus there. But this focus for my thief, I usually give them a ranged weapon. They're going to stick back. Might be a sling if I'm doing a halfling, just for the rate of fire, because I've got that dexterity 19 and can get a couple of magic bullets there, get that high rate of fire going, but could equally be a crossbow. They're there to open stuff up, to find stuff, to disable stuff, to make sure I don't miss anything, and to add some stuff from range. So we've got that build on there. So now we've got the 4. The last 2 characters are now what makes this unconventional or a little bit different or something fun. But essentially what we have is a solid focused party where, again, I send out the Berserker, I send out the Defender to the middle of the battle map. They just camp. They do what they got to do. They fight it off. The Monk gets in there. The speed lets me move around. If I have to apply Stunning Fist or Quivering Palm when we get to that point, that happens. I've got my Thief attacking with range. I'm either on the mob in the middle or maybe something second tier where I want to start dealing with it or cutting it down, or that kind of boss in the back where I just want to start getting a little damage on there. We've got that. Next, Jester. The Jester works really well just on the fact that in this engine, when you're rolling a lot of D20s, stuff happens. Now, the Jester is interesting. No spoiler here, but a slight spoiler. Icewind Dale, the setting is favorable to druids and bards. There's a couple of plot points, story possibilities that open up. There's a couple of gear-specific items that work really well with these character classes. There's plenty of gear for all the other character classes, but we want to take advantage of those named clickies and those named magic items, those wondrous items, to pull a term from Advanced Dungeons & Dragons. The Jester, being a bard class, allows that. So right away, we're going to kind of take advantage of some story items. But playing a bard slash jester means I've got some pickpockets. Definitely no spoilers there. Depending on your alignment and how you view things, there's a couple of items that are really interesting to pick pockets with. Again, trying to make this kind of a fun, unconventional playthrough. I've got my Thief, where I'm not dividing the skill points into pickpocket. I'm focusing purely on those other areas. As the Bard levels up with Dex bonus and a couple of other things, pretty early on, you could be pickpocketing some interesting stuff. So we've got that. Icewind Dale not being super magic-centric and heavy. This is why kind of sorcerers and dragon disciples will excel, because they don't have to find or memorize the spells versus mages that have to find it. I get a little bit of a mage punch with the bard playing the jester, and I don't have to worry that magic isn't as heavy. Or if I find that one scroll and I copy it and it fails, my character isn't crippled. And again, that's not to say you can't play mages. They are important, but we're doing something a little bit different with this build. The Jester gives me that. I've got some combat. I've got some stuff I can do. But the main thing is Bard Song. Now we're going to sidebar for a moment. Bard Song is about consistent buffs. The downside here is, again, if I'm playing that Bard Song or I'm singing that tune, I can't cast spells. I can't do other things. Any buff in AD&D is worth it. Leadership buffs, damage buffs, Thaco buffs, all those plus somethings add up really powerful, really fast. But this is why usually in Baldur's Gate, a bard will be straight. You very rarely see a jester. But Icewind Dale, you've got the trash mobs coming at you. You've got some powerful, iconic monsters where in BG, there might be one, and now there's like 5 or 6. And different waves coming and different aspects of that mass combat system. The Jester with that taunt, yes, they get a bonus. The monster gets a bonus for the save, but there's enough monsters rolling that D20 behind the scene very fast. Things become confused. They walk around. They do stuff. It's very, very interesting based on the combat engine. So I've got that Jester there for a little bit of spells. Strength, I keep it 10. I'm never really going to attack. Yeah, hold a scimitar, katana, look all heroic standing there. But the main thing is to fire off some spells and or hit Bard Song with the taunt. Gets really, really interesting when these mass mobs start just going crazy. The second piece is the Shaman. Now, Shaman's kind of interesting because at first glance, just to sidebar for a second, first glance, you're like, well, essentially it's like the sorcerer druid. I can't memorize the different spells by invoking the forces of nature. I'm locked in. And I've got a couple of extra shaman-specific spells, Poor Man's Cloud Kill, things like that. That's all true, but the dance, the summon spirits, is huge in this, being Icewind Dale. What this means is I gain access to druid spells, which as I level up, insects are just auto-win, fun all around, useful all around. The fact that you've got some summons, that's going to boost up the summons, because usually a mage will deal with summons. You're like, Fritz, I can get past the damage dealing, but I'm losing out on pets and summons. Well, the druid, or in this case the shaman, can make up for that. So we've got that. But the dance spell, where you sit there and you dance, means, again, with combat being longer and more stuff. So essentially the druid dance, behind the scenes, it starts calculating, and it summons, there's a chance to summon different tiers of spirit monsters, spirits to fight for you based on the level. Well, in BG, the combats tend to be quicker, even the intense ones. So you're sitting there getting the summon engine up, and you might pop off a few, and you're like, hey, this is kind of neat, this is kind of cool. But then combat's over, and you're like, okay, my summon's gone. Icewind Dale, the waves after waves and different attacks, combats last much longer. When you get that summoning machine going, these things just stack and stack and stack and stack. So it's that combined with the Jester taunt is very, very interesting. Now we've got the framework. Let's just kind of generally talk about the tactics of character placement. And again, without any spoilers, I'm going to let you fight the combat and the gear that you want to fight. What I'm looking to do, I send out the Berserker, I send out the Defender, I send out the Monk. They camp in the middle of the map that I can see, the area that I'm fighting. Most of the monsters will come into that. The Monk will do the Stunning Fist, do the Quivering Palm, might pull away, might try to hit something else. We've got behind that wall, I've got my Jester and I've got my Shaman singing and summoning. If some stuff gets past that, I will usually break the Bard Song and maybe attack or use some spells. I want to have the Shaman dancing, and then of course the Thief is back there with missile weapons. Another thing to do is to pull in certain monsters to take advantage of that. Meaning I can send the Thief out to scout, or you can use invisibility or use the Monk, other things to scout, reveal the map, and then have my little base far pulled away from that. Have my fighters there, have my Monk there, start the dance going, get my summons up when we've created enough summons. Then send out one character to be seen, pull back to your little base encampment and pull the monsters in. At that point, you've already had enough summons going. You've got your little army going, and just kind of feed and feed and feed. The monsters can do mass combat. We can do mass combat also. A different build, an unorthodox build, a non-magic build, one of the different ways to explore the game.